Welcome, everybody. Thanks for attending what is now, I think, our 12th coffee chat here at Chromium. We really enjoy these and really enjoy having you all here for this show and giving us your questions and providing insight. And hopefully we provide a little bit of insight to you as well. My guest today is David McGrane. And David has seen action on both sides of the creative world, starting with the agency side, where he began his career at McCann Erickson and then Chiat Mojo over in Australia, moved to the UK, where he was with Benton and Bowles, which then became Darcy Macias Benton and Bowles, or we'll just call it DMB&B. And that brought him not only to New York and San Francisco, but in between a stint in Moscow that we're going to learn about. And finally, he ran his own agency, Ozone, here in San Francisco for many, many years before jumping over to the corporate side, where he worked for BlackRock, the financial services firm, The Gap, Charles Schwab, and finally now AAA of Northern California. And so, David, welcome.
Thank you, Tony. Pleasure to be here.
You bet. So you started in the mailroom, the classic story. You started in the mailroom at McCann.
That's correct. That's correct.
How did you work? How did you work from the mailroom on up? This is, I'm sure there's a story here.
Yeah, no, that's it's the classic. Start in the mailroom, delivering the letters. I thought I wanted to be an account person because I'd heard that they form a liaison between the client and the agency. So I thought I could liaise. Liaising sounds good, but noticed that increasingly after work I was not hanging out with the account people. I was hanging out with the creative department and started writing some scripts at night and presenting them to the creative teams that would put up with me, and eventually one creative team presented some radio scripts that I'd written to the creative director as their own. He approved them, and then they said, psych, it wasn't us, it was the kid. So I got to start to write some more and actually moved over to Mojo, which became Chiat Mojo. Shortly thereafter, I sent them a 7-day free trial. I was going to take a week of work off from McCann Erickson and work at Mojo for a week if they wanted to give me a shot. But instead, actually, what they did was they asked me to write some more radio. They gave me a brief. They referred to a particular famous television campaign that was running for Tooheys Beer. They said, "Have you seen that?" I said, "Yes." They said, "Okay, write us some radio ads. Show us on Monday." And this was Friday. So I did 13 ads over the week and showed them on Monday. They said that 7 weren't bad, 3 were pretty good, and 3 of them stunk. But they'd give me a job. And I was like, "You mean you'll
Did you drink
me?" And they said, "No, we'll give you a job."
Did you drink a beer? Did you drink a beer for each ad that you wrote?
That wasn't required. That wasn't required. I wouldn't be surprised though.
That was famously it was the idea that that the creatives were the ones at the 3 martini lunches, but I think it was probably the account people, right? The creatives were too busy biting their nails to do much drinking, but and so. You worked in Moscow. I just want to hear what was life like. And this is back in the days when they used to drive on the sidewalk and stuff, right? It was crazy.
Yeah, it was 90, end of 93 and 94, part of 95. I was in Moscow. I was working for DMB&B, and I'd worked for them in London, New York, and San Francisco at that point. And the head of HR came to me one day and he said, "What about Moscow?" And to be honest, I'd had no inclination at all. I wasn't sure what that was going to be like. And he basically said, so what do you got to lose? You could spend the rest of your life wondering what that would have been like, or you could go do it. And Moscow, at the time, it was like the Wild West. It was like Chicago in the 20s. The KGB units had basically become, freelance organized crime. And yeah, they would drive on the sidewalk because the ticket for driving on the sidewalk was 6 rubles, which was about half a cent. So they would drive their stolen East German BMWs on the sidewalk and just pay the ticket. It wasn't a problem. It was quite fascinating, definitely, to work in a place that had 70 years of self-imposed isolation and virtually no advertising until a year or two before I got there.
That was going to be my question. Is what was their relationship to brands? Because
yeah,
I can great brands obviously coming out of London, coming out of New York, through the advertising. But what was it like to work on essentially brands that didn't exist in the minds of consumers, because there were no consumers, right? Everybody was a comrade, not a consumer, and so you had to make brands relevant, not just but the brands themselves. The concept of a brand had to be relevant to these people. They had never. I mean, I'd hate to talk about Russia as if it were Pluto, but really there wasn't any commerce, free trade, free commerce as we know it, free speech and things of this nature. Or set me straight. Were there brands, and did you just find them and make them happen?
Well, so the famous brands they were aware of, So I ended up doing some work on Reebok, and Reebok and Nike were definitely known brands there. They were, especially by the younger audiences, they were desirable brands, and they wanted that. You had a lot of contraband and black market activity in Russia long before the wall came down. So we weren't starting completely from scratch, but again, they'd had no advertising. They'd had propaganda for 70 years, but no advertising. And so it was interesting. You had to take a careful approach. Everything you said could be misinterpreted. There was no sort of initial shield that you had to break through. So fascinating to take a brand that was well known everywhere and re-educate people on how it might be applicable to that audience. So worked on Reebok, worked on Fiat, worked on Coca-Cola, and I actually worked on Coca-Cola back at McCann Erickson, and so way back when. But to take a brand like that, our single biggest client was actually M&M Mars. So the candy and the pet food, they're two huge aspects of Russian life. They love their pets and they love their candy. So these were very influential brands.
I understand they love their vodka too. Did you get to work in any beverage brands over there too? Or did they not need advertising?
Well, no, they needed that definitely because there was a lot of competing brands, and again, there was a lot of non-Russian brands that were trying to make their way into the Russian market, and actually, it wasn't as impossible as you might think. There was this aspect of sure, we'll try somebody else's vodka, and so Scandinavian vodka or Polish vodka, French vodka, they were willing to give it a try, but there was actually there was a lot of brand battling going on. Vodka was a staple, though. Many negotiations started with the quintessential bottle of vodka being placed on the table because, of course, everybody believed that they could drink more than anybody, and of course, half of them are going to be wrong. So that was an interesting yeah. Yeah.
When you went, when you left the agency side, well, first of all, you worked, as I did for many years, in your own small advertising agency.
Yeah.
And that's a big shift from working with the big agencies, the big brands. Suddenly, you're doing very different things. And how did you find that transition from the the big brands to these, to working more with mid-market and smaller budgets and and the fact that there were no TV commercials, or did you get to do some perhaps? But that shift must have been a challenge, right, to go from one to the other in terms of the brands.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was a big shift. The challenges are similar, though. It was more the budgets were smaller, sure, but like many creatives, I kind of enjoyed the aspect of we have to be scrappy here. We can't just throw money at it. We have to be smart, and we have to find some way to make every dollar work harder, because there just aren't as many dollars for this client. And
did you find that your creative solutions were more innovative because there was no budget, or did you find that in the end, even if you had a great creative concept, that because you didn't have the big production budget, that you couldn't make it happen?
So Ozone co-founded with 3 other partners, and eventually ended up running it myself over a 13-year period. So there were times that it was a great idea and maybe didn't get the support it needed budget-wise, and so never fully came to fruition. I actually know of several that are just like, if only it had had more support, it could have been a contender. But that was the nature of it. You also got a lot more flexibility. Often with the larger corporate clients and the larger budgets, there are a lot more chefs in the kitchen. There's a lot more pre-research that goes on, sort of rounding off any of the edges. So with a smaller budget and an appreciative client, you could definitely get some aspects approved, and your testing was often in the real world, and trying to figure out how to get something that can cut through when the budget just isn't huge. And so you couldn't settle for okay and throw money at it. That's true.
Yeah, and after Ozone, you took what I would consider to be the even harder, made the harder choice to go from having your own agency, which you and I both know is a great recipe for insomnia. And as they often say, if you want to, it's easy to make a small fortune in the agency business. Start with a large one. But those things notwithstanding, leaving being a self-directed person and then heading over into the corporate world, where then you went to work for BlackRock here in San Francisco, The Gap, and Charles Schwab. 3 really big names, both locally, nationally, and in some respects internationally for some of them. What was that switch like, going from being able to set your own parameters, your own goals, to suddenly having somebody tell you what to do? How did you manage that? Because these are 3 really big shifts, going from the agency with all the resources and already the clients are there for you, to your own agency where you get to call the shots, but your budgets are smalling, and as we've talked about, every year you were out there hustling, getting more. You had to get new clients all the time. You're wearing all these different hats. To suddenly, boom, being the one who is telling the agency what to do, but at the same time, somebody's telling you what to do, right? A little under the thumb kind of stuff. Well, how did you manage that transition?
Yeah, it was definitely a major shift. For me, the universe shifted quite a bit at each of those points that you talked about. But if we look at the time where I've had, again, 13 years of a small agency environment, being kind of the decision maker, you still got clients, and they're still going to need to have their needs understood and so on. But no, a big shift. One of the things I liked was some element of specialization. As you said, with a small agency, you're wearing many hats, so a master of none. and I was wearing some hats I definitely was not qualified to wear. So it was good to get back to focusing on something that I knew I could do. In fact, when interviewing, a lot of people at BlackRock were like, "Why would you want to leave your own agency? Isn't that like the nirvana?" And I was honest. It was 2008. A lot of the clients that I was working with were in big trouble, and my nirvana was on shaky ground. So, and I was not a financial expert in any way, shape, or form. But the person hiring me, Pete Boland, he said, "You know what? I've got a building full of financial experts. I don't need another financial expert. I need somebody who understands advertising, understands brand." And I thought, all right, I can help. I can help. So getting to specialize, getting to focus in one area was great. That helped the transition. I still would get my hair on fire and run around and try and get something achieved, because in your own agency you could make something happen if you wanted it bad enough. I ran into a lot of walls. I did a lot of Forrest Gump, just running around. There goes that Forrest. He's a running fool. I would just be running in circles, thinking I can make this happen. I can make it happen. There were several times I couldn't make it happen. So had to learn to stop thinking like that and stop getting frustrated by that. But there's always other people. There's always other people within those corporate environments that think and feel like you, that have had experience in a smaller, more startup type environment. And so you tend to come together, and you find yourselves making things happen while everyone else is still looking around. So there was an element of that like mind together.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the questions that came up from one of our participants, one of our viewers, is the values that you had built by running your own agency for over a decade. You had a certain set of values. How these are both sort of ethics as well as creative values. How did you maintain those? How did those translate into this corporate environment? Once again, not just calling all the shots, but calling all the creative shots. Or were you given great latitude? Were you able to bring what you had learned in your previous life as an independent creative into your life as a captive creative, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, no, there were definitely give and take in that respect. There were some things that, because I'd come from like an entrepreneurial mindset, like-minded entrepreneurs would get together and you could get things done, as I just said. So that was part of it. But other times, definitely not. The frustration for the agencies that we were working with at BlackRock was how long it would take to get things approved. The hierarchy that had to go up and up and up. BlackRock wasn't too bad in that respect. It was a pretty sharp curve up. Contrast to the Gap, for example, which was very flat, but trying to get all those approvals, that they were definitely more in terms of, okay, let's get everybody involved, which can really slow down the process. But at BlackRock, it was pretty much if you got the 2 or 3 above you. But even so, I felt the frustration of the agency, who would be like, why can't we get approval yet? And you said you liked it. How come we don't get to do that anymore? So I could empathize, certainly, and I could look to I guess, be as transparent as possible to tell them as much about, well, here's why. I definitely worked with clients that were just like, I can't tell you, it's a black box, but here's what you have to do now. I'm more of the feeling that if I'm clearer with you as to how we got to here, I'm more likely to get better work out of you. So that aspect was there. Also, in terms of trying to work with agencies as opposed to create the work myself, when you reach a creative director role, you try not to do it yourself. You try to encourage your teams to come up with it. You inspire them. You don't just dictate to them. So try to bring that to the client-agency relationship as well. I'm going to try and help you get me the best work possible. And so my creative director experience helped with that too.
Now, your role now at AAA is actually. But before I move to AAA, let's briefly touch on something that you must have certainly had conversations with when you were there at Schwab and BlackRock. The current Wells Fargo scandal. Talk about a solid gold brand that has been put in jeopardy by the lapses of the culture. And here at Chromium, we're always talking about brand and culture, brand and culture. You got to deal with them at the same time. They're two sides of a continuum, and you can't have one without the other. And so, what were some of the conversations from a cultural standpoint and from a brand standpoint when it came to trust? Because trust is the bedrock of financial services brands, and yet, especially in 2008 when you joined BlackRock, there was a lot of questions about trust in the financial services industry, and now we're facing them here with Wells Fargo, who I think, as you pointed out when we were discussing this earlier, they actually came through the 2008 crisis looking relatively good.
They did. Yeah, no, they did a good job there. And to be honest, I know that there was a lot of admiration and envy for Wells Fargo, that they've been able to come through somewhat unscathed with a lot of trust still invested in them. They were definitely seen as a more dependable, family-oriented, trustworthy brand. And I think to your point, that's how they were perceived. That isn't necessarily genuine. So if they were wishing to be seen that way, but acting the way they were actually acting, it was a time bomb ticking away. It was only a matter of time. If your real aim isn't to help as many people as well as possible, but to give them as many accounts as possible, because that's how you're going to differentiate yourself, that's a recipe for disaster that really no one should be surprised by. It speaks to an arrogance and a hubris that you don't associate with that brand, but you didn't, but you do now. And so, at Charles Schwab, we had also come through the crisis without having made some of the egregious mistakes that other financial firms had made, and that was partly because Charles, his name's on the door, and he stood for something, and helped the brand stand for something genuine, and he'd always challenge.
I actually talked to Chuck. I talked to Chuck twice, not once, but twice. He was very genuine, very authentic, and very upstanding, without a doubt.
His purpose, his reason for being, was to challenge the status quo, to say, why can't you trade online? Why can't we make investing something that everybody can do? Why can't you get the resources you need? It shouldn't just be institutional investors that get that. So yeah, that was a brand story that you could ask people to trust you because it was true. And there are parallels to AAA right now too, certainly. But in terms of the Wells Fargo, it was bound to happen.
Mm-hmm. And so that's a great segue to AAA, because trust is a huge part of it. Tell us a little bit. You are director of brand for AAA, and what is your role on a daily basis? What are you doing there as the director of brand?
Okay, so actually I'm the director of brand and creative services. So we have an internal agency that I'm also running, and that's pretty similar to other small agencies that I've run in the past. The brand aspect is not necessarily something that has had a lot of attention at AAA, believe it or not. So interestingly, the budgets weren't really there. AAA is a not-for-profit, and so it doesn't have the budgets that others in for example, the insurance category have. I think we're outspent something like 100 to 1 by some of the big players in insurance. Yeah. So the fact that we have a share of voice that's 2% is actually pretty impressive. But that being said, there wasn't the attention to detail with the brand. The brand had kind of looked after itself by being genuine for more than 100 years. So in terms of trust, people that are able to gauge these things have us and the fire department basically flip-flopping year over year. The Red Cross is right up there with us. Last few years, Amazon, interestingly, has been up there in the single most trusted brands. But in terms of an Apple or a Nike or other venerable brands, their trust metrics don't come close to what we enjoy here at AAA. And that's literally been 100 years of paying attention to that. That if we want people to reach out to us when they're stuck on the side of the road, they need to be able to trust us. So we can't have associations with brands that would erode that trust. And to think that for 100 years you've been able to avoid hitching your wagon to a Wells Fargo, thinking, hey, they're trustworthy too. Let's do a big promotion with them and have our names be seen side by side. So being able to avoid that for 100 years is pretty impressive. My day-to-day role is to bring. So there's this iconic brand, but sadly, it lacks relevance. You think about baby boomers. They have better and better cars that break down less and less. They drive less and less to begin with anyway. So their usage of our emergency roadside service, for example, drops by about 40% as they get older. So how are we still relevant to them? If you think of
what's road service when what does the Automobile Association mean when the automobile is an autonomous automobile, right?
Yeah, self-driving cars.
How do you relate that?
Yeah, no. So we see that. We recognize that. The self-driving car is not here yet. There are parts of the South Bay. You drive around, you'll see a lot of them, but most of the rest of the country, most of the rest of our footprint, they're not there yet. But they're probably coming. But exactly right. So if we've earned this trust and we wish to retain this trust, then we need to also retain relevance. So, for example, we made available to our members an app where you could test the relative cost of an Uber or a Lyft or even the yellow cab at any given point. You could also pre-book an Uber for a while. We were able to offer that. It was just a test. It was an experiment. We've since retracted that, but that was us thinking, okay, our members need to get around. They need to be able to get from A to B. It could be in an automobile, but it may not be their own, and it might be self-driving, but it's still a way to get around. So how can we help get around? How can we help you do that? And actually, why even limit ourselves to just physically traveling if we also are well known for helping people travel the world? And so, how does that relate now? How has that changed when everybody is booking their own trips online? How can we make that easier, better for our members? And if what we really offer isn't just roadside service, if what we offer is that roadside service enables you to what? To more confidently go somewhere knowing that we have your back. So if peace of mind and confidence ladder up to something more than that, then perhaps that's the answer that we need to add relevance to.
Mm-hmm. And so partnerships, like you mentioned this partnership with Uber. Explain some of how you consider partnerships and whether or not they are good. And these are not exactly extensions of the brand, but how they're good representations of the brand. What's your criteria for determining whether or not a marketing partnership is on brand? How do you decide that? Apart from clearly, uh, stay away from things that are not, the obvious ones, stay away from things that are not safe for work or not family friendly. But what more? What do you look for? What makes a good complement to the AAA brand of trustworthiness?
Yeah, there are multiple different ways to approach that. Obviously, the partners that we've had for a long time, let's certainly keep almost all of them. There might be some where you think that's no longer as relevant to our members, to helping them, enjoy their life more. As we've said in the invitation to this webinar, if it's about helping them worry less and adventure more, if that's what we really provide, then which brands can help us do that? And also, which brands can help us cause a perception shift? So if we just keep doing roadside emergency kits, then, oh yeah, that's AAA. Of course, that would come from AAA. Yes, that helps me, but that's just the AAA I currently know and don't give a lot of thought to. So we can't do too much more of that and expect people to think of us any differently. But can we, align with Lyft and make our members able to enjoy Lyft more, be able to track their Lyft or get a discount on Lyft or something with a brand that you wouldn't necessarily associate us with? But why not? We could do that. If you think of car sharing, if you were to go to the car share lot and there's something there from CityShare and there's something there from Zipcar, but there's an option there where you can get the AAA version. If you could get a car share that's branded AAA, that trust is inherent. If that one breaks down, I know I'm going to be okay. I'm going to choose that one. I'm going to go there. And so, why not? Why shouldn't we open it up to not only aligning with brands like Amazon? Amazon is very well trusted. Amazon is making their Echo available to people who want to have a connected home. How does a connected home fit with AAA? Well, if your home is connected, then while you're out adventuring, while you're hiking in Tahoe, you can reset the thermostat from your hike. So it makes sense to us to enable our members to be able to take a road trip, take a hike, do something knowing that their home is connected, or even just enjoy their life more because of that connectedness. So why don't we, why couldn't we align with Amazon as a brand and Echo as a sub-brand, and maybe we should.
So that brings up a good question. These are members, right? So generally speaking, when you're a member of a club, you go to meetings, you share, meals, you do this. What does AAA do from a membership perspective to keep people feeling that this idea of membership has value? Because so many memberships, like gym memberships, if you can go and do the stationary bicycle at this one or do the stationary bicycle at that one, your membership really doesn't mean membership. It's just a sort of rent. How do you make it so that you have a branded experience for AAA and it's not just rent on roadside assistance?
Yeah, no, very good point, and we think about it all the time. How can we make membership more relevant to our members? How can we make them feel more part of something than they do? Because if they only use it for emergency roadside service, you're very alone. In fact, as you break down on the side of the road, you don't necessarily feel, part of a club until the person who turns up sooner than you expected, sooner than anybody else will. They know what they're doing. They get you on your way quickly. You feel then part of something bigger than you because that was able to happen. We already offer more ways to make more of your membership, but we don't necessarily communicate it as clearly or as well as we should. So the discounts and the benefits that we offer, the number of people that don't realize you can go to a AAA branch and do your DMV work there. Almost every branch in California, many branches in Nevada are beginning to get it. You can do your DMV at AAA. That is something that as a member you get to do. We have ID protection. We have a lot of discounts. We're looking at the discounts certainly to figure out the ones that people wouldn't expect, that would find the most useful, that would find the most surprising. You can get 10% off at W hotels. Everyone's like, well, I knew Best Western, but you mean the W? Yeah, go stay at any W hotel anywhere in the world. You can get 10% off with your AAA membership. So you then feel part of something. I have never worked anywhere that people say, oh, you work at AAA? I love AAA. They say it emphatically, they mean it, and then they pull out the card. Do you have your card with you?
The card.
You got
I do have my card.
Yeah, you don't have to get it right now, but the fact that you could is pretty special. That's not something, you don't pull out your gym membership card. You don't pull out your Costco card. You don't even pull out your American Express card like that. But people pull out the card and they proudly show it. So there it is. There it is right there. That's great. So they already, members already understand that they feel like they're part of something bigger. They feel like they can show that at a rental car and get a discount. They can get movie tickets. Not everybody realizes you can get movie tickets cheap just because we have millions of members. So the movie.
Do the members ever hang out together? Do they have like old car clubs or anything like that? Is there anything where there's actual physical contact?
There is some of that, absolutely. Not as much as you might think. But there's definitely some of that where it's happened a lot. So one partnership we've had for many years is Disney. A lot of members like to take advantage of the Disney benefits when they go into Disney. But the other thing they do is a lot of members have already been to Disney. So there's quite a subculture of, okay, the best time to get to Disney on a Thursday is at 10:30. You've got to go straight to this ride. You'll get straight. There are people that have it dialed in, and AAA members help each other out in that respect. By and large, though, it's interesting. We talked about the millennials a little. Single largest group of the population right now, so it's hard to generalize. And yet, if you were to talk about millennials in a way that they might resonate with, it's that they like to feel individuals. They like to feel like they are unique and different, and they like customization. They like things specially created for them. But they also, so over here they're individuals. Over here, they're quite tribal. They like a tribe. They like to get together with other people who share. So AAA is kind of right in their sweet spot in that you get the tribal aspect of millions of other members getting the same discounts, benefits, and advantages that you do, but also the freedom to travel, to take the road less traveled, and know that someone's got your back. So
I have some questions here from the audience members. Eric asks, he says he likes the idea of alignment with other trusted brands. Can you give an example of other brands, outside of AAA that you think are doing can you, off the top of your head, come up with any that you think are doing a good job of forging those relationships, of either becoming ingredients or co-brands, things of this nature? I immediately think of Pillsbury chocolate chip cookies with Toll House chocolate chips in them, right? So immediately I go for the sweets. But what anything come to mind? Who else do you think is doing a good job of this kind of these alignment partnerships?
Yeah. So at Charles Schwab, there was quite a focus on that as well, and aligning with brands that spoke to the modernity of the solution that Charles Schwab offered. So there were a lot of talks there in terms of aligning with other brands, changing the brand neighborhood. So talking to Tesla about how they're innovative, they're presenting an alternative to the status quo of vehicles. So you could see how Schwab and Tesla might like to talk to a similar audience. So I'm not sure how far advanced that is, but that was an example of that. Geico tends to align themselves occasionally with anything that will draw more attention to the fact that you can save 15% or more on a 15-minute phone call. their singular focus has obviously worked really, really well for them, throwing lots and lots of money for it. You know, I heard Warren Buffett say, if I had more, if I could spend more, I would, in terms of advertising for Geico, because every dollar just comes back to pay me more. Again, we're not in that situation, so we can't quite do that. And in fact, we like to talk more about how we could never sum up your insurance needs in 15 minutes. If we ever did it in 15 minutes, we're shortchanging you. We want you to sit with an agent. And again, coming back to millennials who like to do most of their comparison shopping online, apparently, according to Forrester, they like to come in and talk to somebody, though, with something like insurance. They want to feel like they're getting a customized solution for insurance. They want to talk to an expert and sit in front of them. So interesting how we can meet that need.
Janine asks, how do you make sure your brand doesn't become confusing when expanding, but staying true to your essence? How do you work with, how do you keep that brand clean, pure, consistent?
Yeah,
how do you do that?
Not an easy task. You have to be very careful as you think, okay, we'd like to align with Tesla too. What if something goes wrong there? Or so you have to be careful that you don't dilute your brand in a rush to align with other brands. You also have to, again, try and keep it simple. That's kind of inherent to our brand. You want to be able to just call somebody up, they'll come and change your tire and get you back on the road. Simple, right? So everything that we communicate should be kept simple. One of the issues we've had with our communication on the discounts we offer, there are thousands of them, but I'm not going to be interested in 900 of those. So make it easy for me, make it simple for me to know which ones are actually going to be relevant, which ones are going to be surprising, which ones are going to be useful. So it's inherent on us to make sure we communicate in a way that's much more simple than we have been, for example. And to not clutter the brand, we have to go to an essence that we haven't necessarily captured. So it was there all along. We're not complicating it by adding something new in. It's more about bringing something new out. So an emotional...
What is your brand essence? What would you say is the brand essence of AAA?
So we haven't necessarily isolated that yet. Where we're leaning is, it's not peace of mind because that's too bland and too general. But we certainly provide peace of mind both, yes, exactly, both through insurance and through the roadside service. But if you know someone's going to back you up if you break down, if you know someone's going to, solve your claim if you have an insurance issue, are you more confident? Is confidence something that comes from what we offer? But why stop there? And we haven't even necessarily communicated the confidence aspect, but what if we take it beyond that? If I am confident that someone's got my back, am I more free? Do I have the freedom to take that road less traveled? Do I have the freedom to, live my life, enjoy my life more, knowing that my insurance is going to cover me if something bad happens? So the essence, I feel, is freedom. The freedom to hit the road, wind the window down, certainly ties into our heritage, but also freedom to live in a connected world and not worry. If AAA is checking out these various options for me and telling me which connected home is the one that is best for its members, and I'm going to believe that, I have more freedom to enjoy this cutting-edge technology than I would short of doing all the research myself. So the essence, freedom, it's not something we've talked about. If you were to talk to members now and say, what's the one thing that AAA offers you, they're not going to get to freedom. We would have to help them get there. We'd have to communicate that, certainly not in an overt way either. We don't start claiming that like we're Harley Davidson. But we have parallels there, so over time we can get them to where they would understand that and forge that strong emotional bond that right now we really don't have.
Yeah. Speaking of Harley Davidson, and I'm breaking the third wall here. Hey, Nisha, I don't see that I'm able to share my screen. I wanted to show this picture that I have up of the California State Automobile Association Broken Glass Department. It's a Harley Davidson motorcycle with with this really dapper young chap on it. Do I need to be made the presenter in order to share my screen? Okay. And let's see if that makes it so that I can share my screen. In the meantime, Peter from West Virginia, there we go, main screen, shows, Safari. There we go. All right, look at that. Do you see that?
Yep, there he is.
Yeah, the broken glass department. I think this fellow would be busy all day and all night in San Francisco at this point. There's so much broken glass on the streets. But there he is, looking all the world like Leonardo DiCaprio, and that was probably a big concern back then, right? When you had inner tubes and things of this nature. Now we don't even think about broken glass, but it was a real problem back then.
Yeah, and back then that was the real problem, and so back then that's what AAA did for the members, and getting a motorbike with a side cart like that was pretty cutting edge, I'm sure, at the time. And I don't know where they were able to cast the Leonardo DiCaprio look-alike. That was well done, the chicken jaw and all that.
I thought you had something to do with that, but you haven't been there quite that long. So Nisha, you can take back the presenter mantle again. I'm done with that. But we have a question from
that's
Peter.
that's kind of the point. There's a point there that back then that's what was most that was on the mind of underground car parks in San Francisco. Kind of hard to get the big truck down there. This guy can jump on his bike. There's actually two of them. They're based in San Francisco out of our Embarcadero station, and jump on their bikes, and they're there to get you out of that. So it's our heritage to do this. We need to do more of it, especially in surprising ways. The bike patrol isn't necessarily going to totally shock people, but it is well received. But what's the equivalent there too? What have we done for our members for years that we can start to now? So.
Peter in West Virginia, and we only have a few minutes left here. Peter, and not in West Virginia, in Virginia. Peter in Virginia, being creative, what have you learned on how to do that? What works for you? Do you have to be in a certain place, a frame of mind, a time of day? David Ogilvy famously said that he had to be in a quiet room with a half a bottle of claret. But what any tips to inspire creativity? What works for you?
Oh, I bet that was a nice bottle of claret too. Yeah, no, I've had various things that have helped at various points throughout my career. One analogy somebody drew for me once that stuck in my head was one of Sherlock Holmes, where in the middle of an investigation, he would say, "Watson, let's go to the ballet," and Watson would be like, "But the investigation." He's like, "Let's go, Watson," and then halfway through the third act, he'd jump up and he'd have solved it. He'd be like, "So getting out of your head, getting yourself totally, go to the movies or something," and that aspect works a lot. I used to enjoy going to like card shops where you can have row after row of completely unrelated imagery that can get things to go in your head, and just work on that. Keep a pad by the bed. You're not supposed to try and think at night, but I tend to anyway, so you keep the pad, you write it down. Sometimes the mid-sleep scroll is not legible the next morning, so you can't rely on that alone.
I had a friend who once, she woke up in the middle of the night, she's like, "Oh my God, I know the meaning of life." She reached over, she scribbled it down on the pad, and she just went back to sleep. And in the morning, she woke up to like, "Oh, that's right." And she grabbed the pad, and it said A equals B. So there you go. That's the meaning of life. We've got Michael is asking, how do you think the role of advertising has changed in the last 5 years, especially in the role of brand building? Advertising has changed. There's no doubt about it. How has it changed in the role of brand building now that we're all not watching the same 3 networks and listening to the same uh, 10 radio stations around the country and things of this nature. What's going on?
Yeah. Well, the biggest change, I think it's pretty well documented, is that it's not all about us anymore. It's all about you. So we used to get up on the 3 networks that we knew everyone was watching and just talk about me, me, me. Now it's and boy, wait, that was so wrong. So now that's been changed, and it should never be about what we want you to think about us. It would be, what are you thinking already? How can we find relevance? How can we fit into your life? And that's really, we were kidding ourselves before anyway. That's really how it ought to be. If AAA is trusted but not relevant, let's find ways to talk to you where you are already and where you're most open to what we want to say. What we want to say, what you want to hear, and it gets into tighter and tighter circles.
Sure, and in terms of relevance, I mean, you do more than just automobile. I have a question from Jerry. So clearly you have home and personal liability type insurance, umbrella insurance, stuff like this. How does that make you more relevant as AAA, and is insurance really where you're finding this idea of freedom can be expressed? Is that product line a good expression of your brand?
No, it's a great question. Great question. You can see where it comes from. I mean, initially it was automobile insurance, so it made sense that we made it possible for our members to get insurance from somebody they really trusted, and then obviously their home and their life are very important to them too. So if we're looking to do that, in terms of freedom comes in 2 different ways. Freedom to adventure, certainly. So you have the freedom to aspect, but also freedom from worry. So freedom to not have to be scared that if there's a flood, your house won't be covered. That the 15% you saved on insurance comes back to bite you. So and yet be competitive. We have millions of members, so we can still offer insurance at or about the same rates, but it's from us, and we know what that means, and you're so much more than just an insurance policy. You're also a member, along with the other millions of members we have, and as a not-for-profit, we can genuinely say it's all about the members. So to answer his question, yeah, insurance is right there about helping free our members from worry as they go through their journey of life. There are times that it will be more important than others, and we want to be there for them throughout that journey.
And so, speaking of freedom from worry, I have the last question here, and I want to thank everyone in advance for joining us. I've been obsessed, worried about the election. I'll let you divine which side I'm coming down on, but the Trump brand. What do you think is going to happen with the Trump brand, which prior to this election stood for luxury and opulence and a certain machismo, winning, right? That the brand was all about winning. What do you think is going to happen to the Trump brand, and may already be happening, as a result of the brutal process of going through an American election, which this year for most of us is even more brutal than ever?
Yeah, okay. Objectively looking at the brand and speaking from a personal perspective, this is not AAA speaking in any way, shape, or form. But from a personal perspective, I am going to predict that it will work out pretty well for the Trump brand. I think there'll be some initial carnage. I think that cynics might intimate that it was really just a brand play all along. Some people swear blind that they could see that look in Donald Trump's eyes partway through when it looked like he was actually going to get the Republican nomination. That you could kind of see, wait, no, it was just a joke. I was just looking to build my brand. I don't know if I saw that look, but some people swear they did. And then he kind of had to bluff on with it, perhaps, is the thinking. But I think that there'll be some initial negative. But by and large, you know, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. I think people, plenty of people, will still want to be associated with the Trump brand. It won't be quite the same. I heard an NPR an interview with there's the post office hotel in Washington, D.C. that Donald refers to in glowing terms. People are taking their photos out underneath the Trump sign with, you know, lots of thumbs down, you know. So there will be some initial, you know, backlash, but I think he's still going to be a lot more famous than he was. He'll be famous for all sorts of things, some good, some bad, mostly bad, but he'll still be famous. So I think his brand will benefit financially. I think it will weather the backlash, and as indeed it's done many times already. You know, losing $900 million and coming back from that, he's done this before. There's a Teflon aspect to the brand that I think will remain.
Okay, well, there's still a few questions that we didn't get to. I'm really glad that the audience is so engaged in this, but we are running out of time here, and so David, I want to thank you for joining us here on the show, and as always, I'll look to see you around San Francisco and continue these great conversations that we can have about brand and culture and society, because it really it's amazing to me, and I'm sure you've seen this too, that people complain about advertising, they complain about brands, but at the same time, we love them, we need them, and we love work, and we love to be at work. We love the cultures that we have at work, or maybe we hate them, but they're there, they're part of our lives, and I appreciate you coming in to share with us some of your insights on AAA and on brands in general. And again, thank the audience. But thank you, David.
You're very welcome, Tony. As you can tell, it's hard to shut me up sometimes. I am very passionate about this. And I love talking about it. If you're unanswered questions, if you want to shoot them to me, I'd be happy to try and get to those over the next couple of days and get back to the question askers if that's an option. But thank you very much. I enjoyed it, and yeah.
Me too.